Welcome back to XRP Update, the channel where we cut through the noise and focus on the developments that actually matter. Today we're looking at what could become one of the biggest shifts in XRP's history. Just a few years ago, the U.S. government was in court arguing that Ripple had violated securities laws. Regulators targeted the company, challenged its business model, and turned XRP into one of the most debated assets in crypto. Investors faced years of uncertainty, and many wondered whether Ripple would ever move beyond its legal battles. Fast forward to today, and the picture looks very different. The same system that once challenged Ripple is now reviewing applications that could place the company closer to the center of America's financial infrastructure. That reversal is remarkable, and it raises an important question. What changed? The answer isn't found in a single headline or a single date. It's found in a series of developments that most people overlooked because they were waiting for fireworks. They were waiting for a massive price move or a major announcement. Instead, the biggest changes happened quietly through regulatory approvals, banking discussions, and payment system upgrades. One of the most misunderstood moments came when investors focused heavily on the rollout of new financial messaging standards. Expectations were sky high. Many believed the change would immediately impact XRP's price. But when the day arrived, the market barely reacted. For some holders, that was disappointing. Others questioned whether the entire thesis had failed. But what if people were watching the wrong thing? A foundation doesn't make noise when it's poured. It simply creates the conditions for something larger to be built later. Financial systems rarely change overnight. Major infrastructure upgrades usually happen quietly. That's why experienced observers pay close attention to regulatory approvals, payment standards, and institutional integration. Those developments may not generate excitement, but they often have a greater long-term impact than any short-term market move. One of the biggest developments involves Ripple's conditional approval related to a national trust bank charter. To many retail investors, that sounds technical, but in reality, it's significant. A banking charter is not a rumor or a social media narrative. It's an official regulatory framework that allows a company to operate under federal oversight. That matters because Ripple has spent years fighting regulatory challenges. Now the conversation is increasingly shifting toward compliance, legitimacy, and integration within the financial system. Whether you're bullish or bearish on XRP, that's a notable change. What's equally important is the evolution of digital asset regulations. New frameworks have expanded how certain institutions can handle digital assets, custody services, and reserve management. As those rules continue to develop, Ripple appears to be moving closer to the regulated financial world rather than operating outside of it. Of course, none of this guarantees success. It doesn't guarantee adoption, and it certainly doesn't guarantee a price increase. But it does represent progress, real progress that cannot be manufactured through marketing campaigns or online hype. Another important piece of the puzzle is the modernization of payment systems. Older financial messaging systems were limited in the amount of information they could carry. Newer standards create richer, more structured communication between institutions. That may sound boring, but it's exactly the kind of infrastructure upgrade that helps prepare financial systems for the future. Ripple has spent years focusing on faster settlement, cross-border payments, and efficient value transfer. As financial infrastructure evolves toward those same goals, many investors naturally see potential alignment between those trends and Ripple's technology. Still, one of the biggest mistakes investors make is expecting infrastructure upgrades to create immediate market reactions. Large financial systems move slowly. Banks adopt technology gradually. Regulatory approvals take time. The market often recognizes the significance of structural changes long after they occur. Many XRP holders understand that frustration. They followed developments closely, waited for catalysts, and then watched as the market barely reacted. But being early and being wrong are not always the same thing. Sometimes important changes take years before their significance becomes obvious. This brings us to what may be the most important piece of the story: potential access to the Federal Reserve System. A Federal Reserve master account provides direct access to central banking infrastructure. Institutions with that access operate differently from those that rely on intermediaries. Direct access means deeper integration with the financial system. It means participating more directly in the movement of money throughout the economy. For years, many crypto companies existed on the edges of traditional finance. The possibility of greater integration represents a major shift. Reports indicate that Ripple-related banking structures have pursued this type of access, and many observers continue watching the situation closely. However, it's important to stay realistic. Nothing is guaranteed. Applications can take time. Regulators have broad discretion. Eligibility does not automatically mean approval. That's an important distinction because too many people treat every development as a certainty. The reality is that regulatory processes are often slow and unpredictable. Responsible analysis requires acknowledging both the opportunities and the risks. Even so, the possibility itself is significant. If Ripple eventually gains deeper access through the appropriate regulatory channels, it could represent a major evolution in the company's role within the financial ecosystem. The discussion would no longer be limited to software solutions and partnerships. It would increasingly involve infrastructure participation. When you connect all the pieces together, a clear picture begins to emerge. First, Ripple has moved from regulatory confrontation toward greater regulatory acceptance. Second, major payment systems continue modernizing and adopting more advanced communication standards. Third, discussions about deeper integration with financial infrastructure remain active. Each development matters on its own. Together, they tell a much larger story, a story about legitimacy, integration, and the gradual evolution of the financial system. For XRP holders, the value of these developments is not that they guarantee a specific outcome. They don't. No one can accurately promise future prices or exact timelines. What they provide is context. They help explain why many long-term observers remain focused on structure rather than short-term market noise. Markets can ignore fundamentals for extended periods. Headlines can dominate attention, speculation can drive emotions, but eventually, infrastructure matters. Regulatory positioning matters, institutional adoption matters. That's why this apparent shift in the government's relationship with Ripple deserves attention. The company that once faced major regulatory uncertainty is now involved in discussions about deeper participation within regulated finance. That's a significant change from where things stood just a few years ago. As we move through 2026, keep watching the developments that receive the least attention. Watch the regulatory decisions. Watch the infrastructure upgrades. Watch the institutional moves happening behind the scenes. Those are often the signals that reveal where the industry is actually heading. At the end of the day, the real story isn't about one announcement, one date, or one price move. It's about a broader transformation taking place across regulation, banking, and financial infrastructure. Whether that transformation ultimately delivers the outcomes XRP supporters hope for remains to be seen. But one thing is clear, the story is still unfolding. Keep your eyes on the structure, keep your expectations grounded in reality, and keep paying attention to the developments that matter most. Thanks for watching XRP Update. If you enjoyed today's analysis, make sure to like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments which development you think is the most important: the banking charter, the modernization of payment rails, or the potential Federal Reserve access. Until next time, stay informed, stay patient, and keep looking beyond the headlines.